Welcome to the podcast. My name is Father Bill W. I am an Episcopal priest. I live here in Austin, Texas, and have had the gift of recovery since, December the 27th of 1972. Very grateful to so many people for that gift that truly was given to me. And the purpose of these podcasts is to go deeper into the 12-step program, kind of look at some of the psychology that underlies it, some of the history that it came out of, and the hope is that it will help people to come to a deeper realization of what this transformation process is really all about. Key part of this is the two-way prayer element of it, and we do have a new video on that. It's on the Two-Way Prayer website. I really encourage you to go and watch it. It's about 40 minutes, and it's a process that just changed my life, turned it completely around some 30 years ago. So if you're in need of a little turn, might be a good thing to do. In this series, we are looking at the pioneer program of Alcoholics Anonymous. What was it like in the very early days as it originated? Early stages with Bill W., Dr. Bob, the first 100, that kind of thing. And one of the key elements in it was certainly the four absolutes, the absolutes of honesty, purity, unselfishness. And then in this episode, probably the biggest one of all, absolute love. And just a little reminder that the absolutes, and AAA makes this very clear, they weren't claims of attainment, but they were goals. And that by practicing them on a daily basis, moment to moment even, they resulted in that transformation. And the transformation comes in three levels: at the level of conduct, at the level of character, and at the level of consciousness. And my guest to guide us through this original program is Matt D. And welcome back, Matt. It's really, really good to have you here. So appreciate what you're doing.
Nice to be here. Thanks.
Okay, so in this episode, Matt, we're going to be taking a deeper dive into the fourth absolute, and that is absolute love. And you and I were speaking before we started the tape roll, and that it's probably the most important of the four, and we hope we do it justice, because if people don't get this, then it kind of becomes a mechanical, institutional, dogmatic thing. But this is really where the transformation lies, in an experience of love and a bringing of love into the world. And so I've asked Matt in each of our episodes to go into the All Addicts Anonymous archives and try to bring up something that reflects on the absolutes, takes us into them in a deeper way, and helps us understand them. And you didn't disappoint on this one. So you brought up a piece called No Greater Love. And I wonder if you could give us a little background and then even read it. It's a short article. So off you go, Matt.
Yeah, I'd love to. Not to use my word love there in a silly fashion. So this I pulled this piece together. It's material that Tom Power Sr. had written, and I had bridged into it this piece by a man named Sundar Singh, Sadhu Sundar Singh. I could just give a little background on him. I don't know a hell of a lot about him, but I did read some. He was grew up in India, I believe, and I'm not sure if his family was Sikh. Some Does that sound right? It's
Yes,
some
yeah,
kind
it
of
was. It
Hindu.
was. That's correct. When you got this reading, I did a little research on him too. So fascinating
He,
guy.
he was definitely a fascinating guy, and had a vision of Christ as a child, and set out, went to all kinds of different churches and stuff to uh, not authenticate his experience, but to have an exchange with others about his experience with Christ, and had this kind of well, I guess many of us have seen this. He saw this great divide between his own experience and what he was seeing in these groups of people.
Mm.
It was, a very, very different. There was just a wide divide. And I think he tried for a while, all kinds of different churches and things. Um, I don't know how he ended up having a relationship with Father Sam Shoemaker, who was instrumental in the 12-step movement in a major way. I would assume it was through an Oxford group connection. The Oxford group had this thing where they were very much in the same way. They were trying to make a connection with God, and they were doing it kind of unconventionally at the time by doing it outside of the formal worshiping, churches, if you will. They were really bringing this thing to the blue collar people and steel mills, and even in governments and all these places where you would think would be the last places. uh anyway, this is apparently he was Sadhu Singh did come to Maryland and was present for Sam Shoemaker's ordination when he became an Episcopalian priest, whenever that was. That was prior to his, I guess that would have been prior to his meeting with Bookman, I guess. You may know better
I
than
would think
I.
so. Yes.
Yeah, so maybe that relationship must have been before that then.
Hmm.
Shoemaker was already kind of a well-known figure before the Oxford group too. So anyway, that's a side note. Uh, this is again, this piece gives an account. I feel like this is one of the most relatable kind of descriptions of love as an account, as a program person.
Yeah.
I wanted to touch on the subject of love, but I wanted to do it very carefully. I was mentioning to you prior to this, before you hit the record button, that each progressive absolute here has made me more and more nervous to talk about, because of the magnitude and gravity of what they are and what they mean, and also in a way where I measure up to them.
Right.
Forever, well, not forever. When I first got in the program, the subject of honesty didn't really frighten me much until I started to actually find out a little bit more, again, of where I was in relationship to it. And then every
Hmm.
time a meeting leader said, "I'm going to lead today's meeting on honesty," my stomach would always just churn, and
Right.
oh God, anything but that. And then, purity is like, oh my God, the distaste, the amount of, who knows how
Right.
many listened to the first few podcasts, got to that one, and then took off running. It's just, it's like, my God, the thought of it. And unselfishness, I think if you really take it in its full gravity as well, it equally is like, or even more so, you're like, oh my Lord. Then
Right.
somehow we get to the subject of love and we throw this thing around so casually,
Yeah.
and it
I
means
love
so,
you, brother. I love you.
it means so many things today, and it can't be.
Yeah.
It really is. We are progressively, and Dr. Bob made this actual statement that this one encompasses all the others.
Right.
And that means, inside love is honesty, purity, and unselfishness. And if I approach those with a caution and a fear, I think that fear is what is born into awe. It's like, you start to realize the gravity of these things. Man, when you get to love, this thing is the gravity of it is so large. It's just, I want to make the disclaimer up front. that I'm a guy who's deeply in love or in need of learning how to love more, how to love better. I'm coming in here as a guy who's not I'm not a proficient in this subject. I'm somebody who needs help here. But as you mentioned earlier, you teach the things that you need them to learn the most. And so with that only, I would say that I feel comfortable with being able to even be here to talk on the subject. Do you want, go ahead. Yeah.
No, I just ditto for me,
Yeah.
I knew when we were approaching this, that this was probably one of the most important episodes that we will ever record here.
Yeah.
Because what we're trying to put out to people, I believe, is see, what I was told when I was in treatment was, if you don't find something that feels better than alcohol and drugs, you're going to go back to them. You're going to go back.
Yep.
So you got to find that thing. And that thing is not honesty. It's not purity. It's not even unselfishness. It is love.
Yeah.
The best, most important meeting I was ever at was early recovery, and people were talking about what really lies at the heart of your addiction. Somebody would say, well, I got a physical reaction to alcohol. Well, I'm crazy. And a woman in the back of the room said, I have a love disorder.
Yeah.
And it just struck me. And the truth of it came through. I have a love disorder. I'm not able to give love, and I haven't been able to receive love.
Yeah.
And that's why this thing is so important for everybody who's listening. This isn't something to be put on a pedestal. It's something to be experienced, measured, and we're going to come up short. So
in Tom's book, The Answer to Addiction, he refers to addiction, of course, is it's a threefold, if you will, addiction with it's anchored in the highest part of the person is the spirit, which consists of intellect. It also affects the will, the heart of the person, and then lastly is the love. And he said that when you're an addict, full-blown addiction, the only thing that you love, your love has become so infantile and so egotistical. The only thing that you love is the illusory freedom which the substance or the addictive behavior gives you for a short period. That becomes your whole love. And the thing about it is it's and we'll get to the reading in a second, but if you see an addict in that condition, in which many of us were at a time, it almost reflects the actions of divine love. Like an addict is so willing to sacrifice. I heard a story of a gal a couple of years ago, and this just struck me. She was a mother with a child. She had been shooting up heroin, had formed an infection in her arm. It went septic. She had sepsis, and then ended up with her liver had swollen to 3 times its normal size. And she ended up, it was just a terrible, awful situation. She lost her child. Her family ended up having to abandon her because of her behavior. And she, like, what, you're willing to risk everything in your whole life, your actual physical life, your health, your well-being, your sanity, your child, your family, your money, everything in all this world, you're willing to sacrifice that for this thing. And it's like divine love looks exactly like that too, except the object in which it is that you sacrifice these things for is God himself. It's such, an addict is so willing to make this sacrifice, but it's a very different object at the center of it. Yeah.
Let's go with the story. Let's go with the story.
Okay, so this is called No Greater Love.
No greater
and that's
love.
a reference to John 15:13, which says, "Greater love hath no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends. When you first get into the program, you find yourself being helped by people who have been in the same kind of trouble you are in and who are recovering. But very soon you enter another phase where you yourself are helping others. You begin to work with people wherever their misery has brought them, and you begin to experience the tremendous truth of a very old concept. It really is better to give than to receive. Not only are those who have accepted the help rescued from personal degradation and disaster, but our society has gained an experienced lifetime worker in a critical field of human suffering. Because the only way you can keep the treasure of recovery is to spend your life giving it away. It is great when people are helping you, but it is even greater when you can help others. Real power flows into you from this activity. You become a conductor of agape, the divine love. You put yourself in the line of transmission where God's burning charity is pouring out to his children. The mercy irradiates you as it passes through to the person you are helping. This, of course, is a reiteration of a very old truth. Give and you shall receive. In the beginning, it is right for a person who is new to the program to take what others have to give. But shortly after this, they will want to give back that which had been so freely given to them. The following account, as told by Sadhu Sundar Singh, is a very powerful witness of what happens when you accept or reject this basic truth. And here's his piece. The great gift of service is that it also helps the one who serves. Once, when traveling in Tibet, I was crossing a high mountain pass with my Tibetan guide. The weather had suddenly turned bitterly cold, and my companion and I feared that we might not make it to the next village, still several miles away, before succumbing to the frost. Suddenly, we stumbled upon a man who had slipped from the path and was lying in the snow. Looking more closely, I discovered that the man was still alive, though barely. Come, I said to my companion, help me to try to bring this unfortunate man to safety. But my companion was upset and frightened for his life. He answered, if we try to carry that man, none of us will ever reach the village. We will all freeze. Our only hope is to go on as quickly as possible, and that is what I intend to do. You will come with me if you value your life. Without another word and without looking back, he set off down the path. I could not bring myself to abandon the helpless traveler while life remained in him. So I lifted him on my back and threw my blanket around us both as best I could. Slowly and painstakingly, I picked my way along the steep, slippery path with my heavy load. Soon it began to snow, and I could make out the way forward only with great difficulty. How we made it, I do not know, but just as daylight was beginning to fade, the snow cleared and I could see houses a few hundred yards ahead. Near me on the ground, I saw the frozen body of my guide, nearly within shouting distance of the village. He had succumbed to the cold and died, while the unfortunate traveler and I made it to safety. The exertion of carrying him and the contact of our bodies had created enough heat to save us both. This is the way of service. No one can live without the help of others, and in helping others, we receive help ourselves. That's the end of the piece.
Yeah, Dr. Bob says love and service are our code, and they intermingle with one another, or neither is real. Stories are so important, and it's really how deep information is conveyed. So the big book has stories. Jesus told stories, and we identify with the characters in the story. And when I read this one and meditated on it for a while, I started I could identify with all three of the characters. And so I thought it would be fun to, not fun, educational, helpful, and fun. What the hell? We're a fun bunch. To go through each one and try to, Matt, if you could help us identify. The first guy was, of course, the one who had, and I love this phrase, who had slipped from the path.
Yeah. Yeah.
So he's laying on the side of the road. It's like the Good Samaritan deal. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. This is very much, I mean, I believe this is a true account, but it's very much a parable,
Right.
it's given here. Parable is something where there is a truth that is communicated that is higher than the factual data in which it's given to you.
Right.
Right. And there's just so much meaning built into this actual account.
Yeah.
And you start off with this first guy, which is where we start off in a way in the spiritual life, is we've fallen from the path, or
we're damn near dead.
We're damn near dead. Actually, we were talking about this before. We find ourselves in this condition sometimes in the spiritual life. You find yourself, 20
this
years,
isn't a
30
one-time
years.
deal. We go back and forth amongst these three characters.
We
And it's
sure do.
it's real important to realize that.
That's
There are
right.
some days when
right.
I'm laying on the side of the road.
Yes. Oh God, when I first got in the program, my whole aim was I was going to be the guy who ended up, getting the sobriety and then being able to give the speeches that the new people could listen to. And it's like, no, you find yourself falling off the side of the cliff all the time.
Right.
So we start off with that first person here, and he is a guy that has fallen off the path. What we know about him is beyond that is that he's destitute. Obviously, he's broken in a certain way, right? This is a guy who cannot make it without the intervention of some kind of help outside of himself, and that's what we know about this character.
Yeah. The book says there's millions of them.
Yes.
And the world is in need of people who can bring hope and change to those people. That's why the Oxford group deal was out to change the world. Yeah. And I hope it's not too late for that. So anyway, so there he is.
Yeah.
He and we are laying there in absolute need of a couple of people to come along. So let's look at the man who helps.
Yeah, let me say this real quick first, is that we have no idea how long this guy was trying to save himself. And that's a natural instinct of the person. We talked about in last podcast about the greater and the lesser self, and the lesser self has got interest in its own self, and that's not a negative thing. And most likely this person was trying to do everything he could to save himself, and got to a point where he couldn't keep fighting. And then that brings you upon when you become the conditions. These are the conditions for actually accepting the help that comes to you. So we're now looking at the Sadhu Singh, who's now willing to help this guy out, right? Mm-hmm. Now, what we know about Sadhu Singh and the guide are what we know about them is they are both in a condition of fear. They both are frightened. They're afraid for their lives.
It's the human condition.
It is the human condition, and it is the first instinct of the lesser self. It's going to think of itself and its own well-being. However, he recognized there's a thing that I find almost Mother Teresa-esque about this thing. He says, as long as he has life in him, he's worth saving. And there's you hear this thing of, Mother Teresa used to get questioned all the time, like, how did you pick up all these, 40,000 lepers off the street, and she, of course, would say, I one at a time, but that she recognized Christ in them.
Right.
She saw life in them, Zoe. There was life still left in this man, and that was the thing that Sadar Singh was. He was willing to sacrifice his life for the life that was in this man, right? Which is the no greater love. So he goes and he helps, and he obviously pulls him up and out, sets him up on his shoulders, puts a blanket over him, and progresses on the path now with an additional burden, if you will.
Right.
With it's not easy going. He says the word painstakingly and slowly, right? The idea is, out of fear, you can't save your life and do this thing slowly and painstakingly, right? The lesser self says, no, if you got to do this thing quickly and easily as much as possible, or you're going to peril. He says,
my first sponsor, Floyd, spent 11 years on Skid Row, and he was a counselor. He was director of counseling in the treatment center I went to. And he said he always wanted to put a big banner in his office that said, "People are a pain in the ass." Yeah. But he thought it probably wasn't a good way to but it's true. I mean, you come up against the guy who's laying in the gutter there, and you're confronted with these two selves that you're talking about, right? And they're both real. Don't fool yourself. One of the things I love about Richard Rohr helped me a great deal in saying that he visited with some of the sisters who lived with Mother Teresa. And he said she could be a real pain in the ass, is what the sisters said. It endeared Mother Teresa to me in a whole new way.
These things. Yeah, go ahead.
No, just that we're both.
And that's the thing that I was saying earlier about these absolutes, that there's the progressive kind of nervousness that's involved. There's an additional tension. It's like it's only in the tension itself that the heat is created, and we talk about that, and we'll talk about it more here in a second, but that's the actual thing that saved their lives together, is this actual heat that's done in tension. That's done as Frank Bookman used to say, you can't administer eye medicine from a second-story window. It has to be done intimately and upfront, and that means there's tension there. There's character defects that are rubbing up against one another. There's difficulties. There's all kinds of stuff that's getting worked out. It's not comfortable. It's not easy. It's not the lesser self's aim. It ends up being something other than that.
And what Jung would say, it is this clash, these two opposites coming in collision with one another. That's the only thing strong enough to create a new consciousness.
Yeah.
And that's what this story is portraying. That there's a new consciousness and that's the love part that is stronger than any of us, but can act through us and overcome the fear and overcome addiction.
Yep. Yeah.
But don't ever forget that we're that third guy too. We're the one who says no. No. Enough's enough. I've done enough.
The third guy comes in, obviously, is truncated self, in the sense that it's just lower self. There isn't this consideration for others. Remember, we were talking about with the lesser and greater self. The lesser self is concerned with itself.
Right.
The greater self is concerned with that which is outside of itself, but also includes the lesser self.
Right.
And so in this case, it's truncated. This is a person who says, if you value your own life, you will go right now. Right? This is a person who is valuing his own life, thinking only of himself, thinking only of his own well-being. And because it's truncated, he cannot see. He says, our only hope is to go as quickly as possible. He has no hope outside of this truncated small hope for saving his own life. His hope doesn't extend beyond that, right? Where the other person's hope extends, Sadhu Singh's extends beyond that. He doesn't know what his fate is going to be. He's assuming I'm assuming that he's thinking it very well mean peril, but he would rather perish with this other person than going alone. So this is another critical point about this third character. This person has decided to go it alone. He's going to do this thing himself. He's going to, and it already stated that he's in fear, right? This is a guy
Right.
that big book uses that term, driven by fear, self-delusion, so on. This is a guy who's driven by fear. He wants to save his own life. And in a way, you say, well, geez, what the hell's wrong with that?
Right.
It is the first instinct and inclination of a human being. You see someone drowning, the first thought is, oh my God, if I jump in there and try to save them, I may drown too.
That's right.
But then something else comes in and says, but this, do you have this conversation with yourself in this intellectual, philosophical terms? No, something says, there is something I need to save this person. I need to try. And you jump in.
It breaks in the consciousness. It's an introduction to the power greater than self,
Yeah.
small self.
Yeah.
And from time to time, it breaks in and takes the wheel.
Yep.
And you go with it.
Yep.
And if you don't go with it, you're going to wind up like the other guy.
That's right. And so the saving power here was it. The reason I chose this piece, again, out of a caution for not being superficial or sentimental or
Right.
trite on the subject of love. This is one way that addicts, first of all, there's a built-in component, as this reading prior to the Sadhu Sundar Singh material was saying, that you have to do this if you want to save yourself, which is what happened in this account.
Right.
The treasure of recovery, you only can experience it if you give it away, right? And in this particular thing of the Sadhu Singh, where the actual thing that is saving you is it is agape, right? So as Tom says here, it is great when people are helping you, but it is even greater when you can help others. Real power flows into you from this activity. You become a conductor of agape, the divine love. You put yourself in the line of transmission. So you're in a line of transmission. Remember, we are not the source and seat of that, right? How it is that we have just even in a physical sense, how you stick a thermometer in your mouth and it reads, whatever it is, 98.6 or whatever, how that even happens itself is some kind of a miracle. There's some kind of at any moment that God decides to depart from you, your own Zoe, your own life, that temperature becomes very different. And your life departs from this physical body.
And that's the way to understand this absolute that you had a vision right there when you were speaking. and you stick a thermometer, a spiritual thermometer in your mouth, and you take your spiritual temperature.
Yeah.
What's my agape level? What's my love level? Is love flowing into me and out from me, or is it stopped up in some way?
Yeah.
And what I'm going to find is it's stopped up.
Yeah.
And
And
there are
the
precious moments when it's flowing. And that's what feels better than the alcohol or the drugs. But I got to get back to that. I got to get back to the clash of these two selves, selfishness, self-centeredness, as we looked at last time. It's there. Don't deny it. But through the love of God acting through me, I become a channel for that.
they had great checkpoints for this in the Oxford group, and their greatest ones were: are you getting your quiet time? This is where you become an adequate conductor for the transmission,
That's right.
right? I work on a farm. I deal with electricity quite a bit. I don't understand it very well, but I know enough to know what I need to know, which is what to touch, what not to touch, what things conduct better than others. Your prayer time is to make yourself an adequate and sufficient conductor. I know electricity doesn't travel through wood same way that it does certain kinds of metals, right? That's what the quiet time was for. The other thing was in the Oxford group, and obviously got totally brought into AA, is the other place that you find out whether you are where you are in relationship to this is how are you doing helping other people. So
Right.
that slogan again of, if you're not winning, you're sinning. It's like that
Yeah.
shows you where you're at in relationship to this. I think this whole thing came in such a beautiful way with Bill Wilson's spiritual experience. We talk about it a lot. It's an experience of light and so many other things, but I think he was literally baptized in agape, God's love. So agape is this divine love. There
Yeah.
are if you are interested in studying it some, I've been listening to C.S. Lewis's book, The Four Loves, but she just breaks it down into the
Mhm.
four Greek names for love. There's three natural loves. One is affection that you have for different things. Storge, it's usually in relationship to a parent has for a child, but it can be for a dog or a dog for a cat. It's just affection. There is philia, which is brotherly love. I live near Philadelphia.
Mhm.
It's friendship. There is eros, which is sexual love. We talked some about that in the absolute purity when we were there. Then those are the natural loves, but there is this higher love, and this is selfless love. This is divine. This is the divine love, God's love for man, and this is the thing that I think that Wilson was enveloped in, because he says, I came out of it with one main thing, which was I was going to be okay,
Mhm.
but it was contingent that I go and help other people. And that's what this whole thing is about. And I think, like, that's a reflection, like your willingness to, as you said, Dr. Bob's mentioned, I mean, he made a couple of statements about the program where he referred to love. He said, if you simmer down the 12 steps to their core, they mean love and service, right?
Exactly.
That's what this thing is. If you could take one word, I had this, I've been making myself a little vulnerable occasionally on this podcast and saying things about myself. I had a fifth step that I did many years ago, and I
Mhm.
brought in some stuff about how I wasn't a very good husband, and it had to do with, well, I wasn't thinking about the subject of love so much, but I was thinking, of course, in my own truncated view of myself, and the guilt and embarrassment of admitting things and stuff. And
Right.
I was desperately trying to force through egotistical means ways of change onto my wife. And this is what the person who in my fifth step, he said that the 12 steps, and I was having no success, of course, everybody would know. You try to force somebody into change. I can't even make myself do things that I want to do half the time, and I'm somehow under the foolish notion I'm going to make my wife do these things. And this is what he said to me. I've never forgotten it. He said that very thing of Dr. Bob's statement, although he wasn't referring to Dr. Bob. He said, if the 12 steps, if you were to summarize them down, boil them down to one thing, they would be love. He said, I promise you that if you try to give your wife the program in that form, she will never reject it.
Mhm.
I thought, I've never forgotten that. No matter how short I fall, it's like, this really is some, boiled down thing of all of what this thing is about. It has to be broken out for our understanding and practice and other things. And I think if we just talked about love only, it would go into sentimentality and other things. But
Yeah.
this thing really is about this willingness to selflessly help someone else out, to care about them, to consider them, to think about them, to put yourself in their shoes. All the things that happens if you do the inventory work that look, the character defects that we've been talking about, and you look at the selfishness and the dishonesty, all that's driving you towards this central thing, which is, and this is why the 12th step, which is broken into 3 parts, this is why it says, passing this thing on to other people, because it's like, and it comes at the very end. All of this is built up so that we can be part of the transmission of this thing. We do not generate this love on our own. We're just a conduit for it. But when you are a reception for it, and he calls it transmission, Tom calls it transmission, when you actually have it transmitted through you, it doesn't just alter the other person, it alters you at the same time.
Right.
This is Lois saying to Bill, yes, you've been trying to help all these people, nobody gets sober, but look at you. There is some transforming thing that happens. And I think this is what came out of Bill Wilson's experience in the hospital. It was, you're going to be okay, but that's contingent upon you carrying this message to other people. That's our primary aim here.
That's right. Kind of, one of the purposes of this whole series is to get back to the original program, how it evolved. And I got my introduction to it through a guy named Earl Husband in Oklahoma City 30 years ago. And I've talked about this before. He introduced me to the Oxford Group program before there were steps. And one of the things he said, and I spent about 3 hours with him that night. And one of the things he said was that these people read things. They were readers. And the 3 primary things that they read, both in Oxford Group and in early AA, were the Sermon on the Mount, the letter of James, and then the third one was 1 Corinthians 13. And he's told me a little story that I've just never forgotten. He said this is before the big book existed. And what so they'd read, these drunks would get together and they'd read 1 Corinthians 13. And when you and I were talking about, oh, you bring a story, I'll bring a story. I wanted to bring this story because it was based on the book that they loved was Drummond's The Greatest Thing in the World. And it's the love chapter in Paul's letter to the first letter to the Corinthians. It's chapter 13. It's read at every wedding, just about, and I thought I'd go through it briefly. I won't do the whole thing, but it talks about love, and what they would do, what these guys would do, was they'd pick one of these characteristics of love and go home and put it into practice in their lives, you know? So, hey, Charlie, this week we're gonna be patient and kind. And we're going to go home. We're going to practice being patient and kind. And then we're going to come back here next week and say, how'd it go? So here's the reading. If I speak in the tongues of men and of angels, or if I quote the big book left and right, but have not love, or the Bible, I'm a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. And if I have all faith so as to move mountains, but I have not love, I am nothing. If I give away all that I have, and if I deliver my body to be burned, but I have not love, I gain nothing. Love is patient and kind. Love is not jealous or boastful. It is not arrogant or rude. Love does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice at wrong, but rejoices in the right. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends. It's a showstopper. It just calls us to look at where are we on this journey of learning love. Merton said an interesting thing, I thought, that he was asked once, did he believe in the afterlife? And his response was, well, I do believe that it has to continue in some way, because learning how to love is the toughest damn thing anybody goes through. And if that can't be continued in some way, kind of a waste of time. So that was really, really helpful to me, that that this is not some pious religious kind of document. It's and that's what the Oxford Group is trying to do. Take these things and put them into action. Change yourself. And love has the power to change us. So,
Yeah.
Anyway.
It was at a memorial service for Dr. Bob after, obviously after he passed. Bill Wilson had said this. He said, I never can forget those mornings and those nights at the Smiths. I can never forget Annie reading to us and the 2 or 3 drunks who were hanging on out of the Bible. I couldn't possibly say how many times we read Corinthians on love, how many times we read the entire book of James with loving emphasis on that line, faith without works is dead. It did make a very deep impression on me. So from the very beginning, there was reciprocity. Everybody was teacher and everybody was pupil, and nobody needed to look up or down to the others. I think like they really, when they said in the big book, love and tolerance is our code, I think they really meant it. I think they did do that. They studied this thing. They tried to understand what it meant. They tried to go out and carry it to others. They tried to practice it in all their affairs, in their home exchanges, in their life, in their business exchanges, and everything they did. They took this very seriously. I think they did understand the gravity of what this thing means, not just superficially tossing around big words like love. The other thing I think they understood, and Tom touches on this in his book, Invitation to a Great Experiment, is that there's a critical understanding of something about human nature and trying to practice these things. If you are in spiritual sleep, you cannot practice the absolutes, any of them really. You can, fortunately, in God's creation here, you can approach them where you're at. Everybody's got a little touch of honesty in them, and a little touch of purity, and a little touch of unselfishness, and a little touch of love. And that's key. Like, hang on to what touch you do have, because that's the thing that allows you to grab onto practicing it, and accepting more of it. What little bit you do have is a great gift, but you can't get very far in sleep. And I think when we talk about the word love, and I'm going to go out and try to love other people or love myself or whatever, very often we're doing this in actual sleep. That's why these guys, it was so critical in the early days that they said, get your quiet time in.
Yeah.
Like do the things that helps you awaken, right? This is the kind of thing that helps you to awake. My capacity to love actually is not forward. It's vertical. It is above me. You know, it's like ability to love somebody else is above me in a certain sense. Where I'm at right now probably is mostly in the lower self, the person that's considering myself, my belly and its hunger, you know, my drizzly whatever, you know, my work situation not being what I wanted, the person driving too slow in front of me or what have you. And it's like to awaken is to remember that the higher self, which is this, you are not the center of the universe. There are things that are greater than you. There are things more important than you. You are on an equal plane with some of these things, but these things come from God himself, and that is above us now.
And also in us. The great reality
In
is
us.
within. So it is accessible. I love the way you put that, Matt, that there's a little bit of this, no matter how far down you may be,
Yeah.
there's a little
Yeah.
bit of this. And it's like a little burning ember, you know, and sometimes I'll do a meditation. It's like, okay, I see this little ember in my heart. It's about all I got. It's just it's a little piece of coal that's kind of on fire.
And
Blow on
and
it.
if and if you come at the subject of love with the self truncated, it's going to, you know, with it being the lower self, that's egotistical. That's an egotistical approach to this thing. And there is a lot of that is said these days. You know, you got to love yourself. And that's true. But as we've
Yeah.
been saying already as a correction, it's the greater self that also loves the lesser self. You know, it has
Right.
appreciation for it. And I
Yeah.
think when you come at it in an egotistical, truncated fashion, I hear it all the time in the program. You know, there's all this talk of self-care and self-love, and those things in a balanced way are very good. But you see, in this account, in the Bill Wilson account, in the early AA and Oxford group account, it was like you put as long as there's life in this person, we're willing to sacrifice everything for this cause, this thing, right? They're not talking to themselves in that way, but you become willing to be there for this person. They may have barf on their breath, they may stink, you know. I mean, this is not a lovely, you know, affair
No,
here. This is
we're usually not pretty when we begin.
we are not pretty, you know. And I think this is why you have an account of like a Mother Teresa, as feisty
Yeah.
as she may be. They did what early AA tried to do, is divest yourself from anything that may prevent you from being able to make contact with this love, and that is
Right.
the obstacles of money and fame and success. You know, this is why they were going so far out of their way in the beginning to be careful how they related to money and anonymity and fame and all this. It really is. And you know, Bill, they use this term, the language of the heart. There's obviously a reference there to love. It is, you know, this communication, one guy to another, you know, you know, the tension of the whole thing. It's where the heat is produced. It is the saving power that both lifts you and very often the other person. You hope, you know, the other person is in God's hands, but your willingness to be able to practice this thing so you have something to offer another person. It gives you what the thing that love does, because it comes from heaven itself, is it gives you joy. It's like, my God, this is the thing that I wanted all along. This is the thing I yearned for all along. And here it is in becoming a adequate and proper conduit for God's love to give to somebody else. if you try to keep it for yourself like this guide, you end
Right.
up dead. You end up dead.
Yeah. So let me finish off 1 Corinthians 13,
Yeah.
because it takes us on that progression. Paul says, when I was a child, I spoke like a child, I thought like a child, reasoned like a child. But when I became a man, I gave up my childish ways. For now we see in a glass darkly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall fully understand, even as I have been fully understood. So faith, hope, love abide, these three, but the greatest of these is love. So, Matt, you did a great job of leading us through this very important discussion, because it is the thing that I think addicts are looking for in all the wrong places, but we have to feel like we are on a journey that is leading to something more than just not drinking, not drugging, not sexing, but is more satisfying.
Yeah.
And I think love, real love, agape love, as you're speaking of it, is what we're made for. And when we feel that wholeness in ourselves, that fills the whole. So very beautiful, beautiful. Go.
This is my last. I'll wrap up here. I'll
Yeah.
just say Chesterton said that something that's worth doing is worth doing badly. And I would just say, it's worth trying to love, even if it's done badly. It's worth it, to keep trying,
And it's going to be done badly.
It's going to be done badly. Yes.
Yeah. That's why I take my inventory first thing in the morning. How did I do yesterday with loving and honest and pure and unselfish? And 99% of the time it's, well, you screwed up here, but I don't get yelled at. That's the beautiful part.
Yeah.
I don't get yelled at for it. I get encouraged to go again, get up.
I do want to recommend just a couple books that I found helpful on this subject, and then I think I'm all here. Obviously, the 1 Corinthians reading out of early AA is just, it's key. The other is these are just ones that I've found very useful. I recommend What Men Live By Leo Tolstoy. It's a very short read. It could be done in about 25 minutes. The other is The Four Loves by C.S. Lewis, just to have an understanding of the different components of love. It may not be for everyone. There is actually an audio version of him reading it. It's on you can find it online. It's important, I think, to understand the aspects of love and in their form. It's not just one thing. I think we conflate it often.
Right.
And lastly, I have not read all of his books. He wrote a lot because he was poor and he had to support his large family. But I recommend any novel by George MacDonald. He just this thing gets communicated best through novels and creation of some kind, through music. We've talked about that before. But his novels, just that this thing of love comes through in such a way. Sometimes the entire book just brings you right to it, and you end up, with soaking, your everything around you, because you just realize this thing of you can't put it into words. All you can say is love.
Yeah.
So,
I will try my best to put as many of these things into the show notes as possible. The story that Matt read will be there, and links to as many PDFs, versions of some of the books and things that Matt just mentioned. I'll try to research those and put them in the show notes. And Matt wanted, he has a project and someday we'll do a series on this. Great books on the way to God, and it's so important that we in our quiet time in the morning, in addition to the two-way prayer, we're also educating ourselves, reading from the teachers who have gone the route and have something to say to us. And it's vital that we supplement our, people who say everything's in the big book. Well, big book, go find out what other people, they encourage us to go. And the pioneers were great readers, and they read a lot of this material. And that's how they kind of formed the program. And speaking of that, in next week, we're going to start looking at the 12 steps and how they evolved, how they came from the Oxford group and migrated into the 12 steps. And Matt will lead us through that, and I'm looking forward to it. And so, Matt, I want to thank you for being a great guide on this episode, and look forward to the next. And I want to thank you guys for listening. I hope it, as Matt and I said, we both approach this with a little fear and trepidation, because it's really important, and we wanted to do the very best we could to communicate a little sense of hope and direction to people who are perhaps struggling with God, or what this love thing is all about. So thank you guys for listening. Hope it was helpful, and come on back.